All right, here we go. Welcome everybody back to the Talking Average Fitness Podcast. My name is Sam Burns. I'm here most of the time. So far, I've been here every time. 50 episodes deep, almost a year.
Yeah.
We haven't been canceled. We haven't
Guess what?
been
Not hard enough.
right. We haven't been banned. We haven't. Yeah, we're not popular enough. We haven't been demonetized. We haven't been monetized either. So we got that
Okay,
going
so
for
we
us. Right.
haven't been demonetized is because we've never been monetized.
We've never
So
been we're not
gotcha,
making
bitch.
enough money to not make money. Uh, as always, by my friend and compatriot, Mr. Kevin McCarthy. Kevin, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing good. I'm ecstatic about the fact that we haven't been canceled yet, which just means that we haven't tried hard enough, or we just don't have a large enough audience to where people care enough to cancel us.
Well, we
Which
did get that one guy.
oh, that's yeah,
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 yeah. We got one guy. So it's one thing to be like, we do the podcast. It's another thing entirely. We've got an AI utility that we point the YouTube videos at, and they clip things out, and we dump them on because it's like the bare minimum in terms of effort that we're putting out here, ladies and gentlemen.
yeah.
And so we posted a bit, and it was talking about stretching. Um,
Oh,
and
yes.
and the guy was like, in quotes, bunched up with blood and lactic acid. That's not how it works. And I'm like, isn't it though? I texted Kevin, and I'm like, isn't this how it works? And both of us were like, I'm pretty sure that's how it works.
Yeah.
So I had to go back and I did a bunch of research, and the answer is yes.
I mean, if
That
you
is
want to
exactly
like
it.
nerd out a ton, I went to in college my senior year. There
Yeah.
was a oh fudge, I don't know what to call it aside from like an exercise science convention. We
Nerd.
went like pretty much a bunch of nerds, and so like our senior class went with our two professors. One of our professors was presenting at
See,
during one of the lectures at the convention,
see.
and so we just went. And there was one that was like controversial take. And this dude, like, basically, the title of his lecture was "Lactic Acid Doesn't Exist." And so, of course, like that roster, you had to like try and like get seat. Like there was just all the seats were gone.
Sure.
Standing room was like it was just packed because everyone's like, "What the fuck is this guy on about?"
SRO, standing room only.
Yeah, like what is he on about? Lactic acid doesn't exist.
Right.
And so this dude, to his credit, like for an hour, he dove deep into like chemical equations of like what happens in muscle tissue,
Right.
both like at rest, during exercise, like based on like pH level, all the fun stuff.
Yep.
He's diving in. And he sat there and he pulled up a series of equations. He was like, well, this is the chemical equation for lactic acid. Like
Okay.
these compounds over here can combine with these over here. And then that leads to this compound here,
Sure.
which is lactic acid.
Sure.
And he was like, but that doesn't happen in muscle tissue. He was like, as we go through the whole thing, he's like, based on, and I forget exactly how he worded it, but it was like essentially some factor of some sort
Mm-hmm.
that essentially made it where like lactate is produced,
Yep.
which we know because it can be used as a substrate for energy and regenerating energy and all that fun stuff.
Sure.
Like it's not lactate, it's not lactic acid, it's a lactate
Blood lactate, I
molecule.
believe.
It's a lactate molecule and then an extra hydrogen. And so when
So it's
everyone's
an acidic,
right,
like
well,
lactate molecule.
but the thing is, but they're not together though. It's like it's the end of the equation spits out there's too many hydrogen ions to make like it doesn't quite make it. And
Yes.
so or the because the chemical equation for lactic acid, I believe it's like would need two hydrogen, but there's just the one left over. So it doesn't make lactic acid, so to speak. He was
Right.
like a lactate molecule and an extra hydrogen ion. And
Right.
so the lactate is like, when you say like, oh, I'm doing my lactate threshold testing, like there's a certain amount of millimoles of lactate you can have before things start to tank. So
Right.
it's like, that's where that kind of comes from. It builds up in the blood tissue, you flush as best you can, you recycle it to regenerate energy.
Mm-hmm.
But he was like the burning sensation in your musculature that people associate is like, oh, it's just lactic acid building up in your muscle. It's
Right.
just that all the extra hydrogen ions that are being produced drop your pH muscle or drop your pH level within that muscle tissue, which makes it acidic overall. It's not lactic
Interesting.
acid. There's lactate in there, and then the cell just becomes acidic, which
Interesting.
creates the burning. And so he went through this whole thing, and we all sat there just like mind just like
Yeah.
done. And so at the end of the lecture, we're all like, all of our classmates and professors are sitting in like at like 2 rows of, like 6 or something, like all 12 of us. And our
Yeah.
professor turns to all of us and he goes, everything I taught you guys last semester was a lie. I'm sorry. It's like-
Hilarious.
and so maybe that's what he was on about, because it's like that was back in 2017. We went to that convention. So like that
Sure.
would be more mainstream research now, but it's not. I still, whenever you research stuff about like mechanisms, what happens into muscles,
Yeah.
that isn't readily up. You have to dig to
Oh,
find.
yeah.
If I can hop on a PubMed and find that article, because he got it published.
Oh, good.
So if I can find that, I'll send it to you.
Please do.
Um, because it was interesting, and it was awesome to see. He was the one person at the convention that like challenged decades of exercise science research.
Conventional thinking.
Right. So it was a really well put together lecture.
Yeah.
And like all throughout, like I was very good at chemistry, like chemical equations were my shit. And so I'm going through, I'm like, fuck, he's right. Like like
So it's
the math for the first time ever, the math is mathing. Like,
right. So it's funny you
so
mentioned that. Have you seen the movie The Martian? Matt Damon,
no,
stuck on Mars.
I
Okay.
know which movie you're talking about. I've never seen it,
All
but
right. So The Martian, my wife is gonna like just she's looking over the edge of the couch, being like, Jesus fucking Christ, The Martian. So there was a window of time where like we would get on like long car trips, and I would just put the audiobook for The Martian in, and we would
okay.
listen to The Martian. And
Yeah.
so I know that book very well.
Okay.
And so it's funny because it's a very, very like um, sarcastic, acerbic wit at a PhD level. And
Mm.
so the guy who wrote the book is a legitimate engineer, and like that's like is a pretty smart cat. And so he's talking about like how to make fuel so that he can create water, right? That's one of his problems. And they
Mm.
go into it, and all I think about as I'm listening to you is him describing this process of making water. And his quote is, chemistry, being the sloppy bitch that it is going to ensure that there's some extra ions or atoms left over, and it's going to make ammonia. Do you like the smell of ammonia? Well, it's going to be prevalent in my increasingly hellish existence. And
Well,
like,
you think about, it's like, okay, like each chemical equation produces an extra hydrogen ion,
yep,
and it's like one or two more. There was like an imbalance in the equation so that
yep,
it didn't quite make the chemical thing for lactic acid. And you would think logically it would make
yeah,
sense, like, okay, if it produces a lactate and an extra hydrogen here,
yep.
and then an extra lactate and an extra hydrogen here, that these two hydrogen would just make one lactic acid and one lactate.
But no,
But it doesn't do that.
no,
And when you ask chemists or physicists or whatever why, they're just like, I don't fucking know. Like,
right?
what was there's like a comedian that does a bit about like,
Yes,
like the
Pete
atoms.
Holmes.
Right? Yeah,
Pete Holmes. Yes.
the
When
atoms.
you
There's
knock
like why?
on the table, why
Yeah,
don't they go through? And you ask people, and they say, we don't know.
that doesn't make any fucking sense. That bit is absolutely hysterical because he's just like,
Oh,
no, everything's made out of atoms. Sure, won't think about that ever again. Like,
that makes sense.
that makes so much sense. My hand's made of atoms. The table's made of atoms. The same atoms that make up the table make up my hand. So when I
Yeah.
hit, why doesn't it just go through? I don't fucking know. I'm like,
Oh,
so,
he's such a great delivery on that bit
as
too.
as Jesse from Breaking Bad says, science, bitch.
Science, exactly.
So
Well, I'm glad we're 9 minutes into this and we have exactly nothing to talk about,
we've gone over the chemical equation for lactate and
right?
lactic acid and whatnot.
Although I'll tell you what we can talk about this. We should talk about this. So,
It's good.
um, there's a bunch of stuff that gets. We were kind of chatting about this before we hit the go button.
Mm.
CrossFit, as an
Mhm.
organization,
Mm-hmm.
has an Instagram account. Got several Instagram accounts.
So many Instagram accounts.
So many Instagram accounts. For CrossFit training, which is the coach slash trainer oriented content, and even CrossFit.com,
Mm-hmm.
there's a bunch of stuff that ends up making it to that page that I look at sometimes and I'm like, why the hell are they showing us that?
Yeah.
Um, and the example that we were talking about was the banded pull up, right?
Yep.
So I know way more athletes that use bands for pull-ups than don't.
Yep.
Period, full stop. And early on in my coaching career, it was, well, that's what you do. You know, if you don't have pull-ups and you want to practice pull-ups, you grab a band, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I and I think back on that, and I'm like, how much did I shortchange people's progress by simply saying, grab a band, you know? Because, so here's something I never thought about until someone said it out loud, and I'm like, oh shit. Um, bands, when you go buy them, are called resistance bands.
Mhm.
They are not sold under the name of assistance bands.
Right.
And so if I'm using a band not to create resistance, but instead to assist me doing something, banded pull up a great example, loop the band around the top, bring it down to my foot, stand in it. The most resistance that I'm creating, i.e., the most assistance it is providing to me, is at
Mhm.
the bottom of the pull up.
Right.
Right. Whereas when I pull, right, everybody can pull like the first 3 inches, right? Where it gets hard is the last 6. When I've got like from here to clear, that's where it gets hardest. And that's where the band is helping you the least. So, and I think I know what you're going to say to this, but I'm going to put it out there so we can have a discussion about it. Why the hell do we do that then?
I mean, it's what I'd said to you, and this is like in full ownership of this for me. We have strict weighted pull-ups in the workout today.
Yep.
One of the options people are rolling through is a banded strict pull-up. And I have multiple options of strict pulls, excuse me, to have people roll through.
Yeah.
And I've even said before we start talking on the podcast, like it's an easier and lazier way to get people on a pull-up bar doing something resembling a pull-up.
Right.
So here to therefore, does that mean I'm going the easy route and lazy route? Maybe, probably. And I'll own that. There's like when you have a class of 20 people, and you're like, okay, I got to try and manage 20 people going through 3 different movements, and we're
Yep.
warming things up, and it's way easier to just say, hey guys, if you need some assistance on the pull up,
Right.
grab the band that you need, get your pull up station set up, and then we'll worry about the rest later because we have 2 other movements to go through. And yeah, I think the reason that it became so popular is because there's a low barrier to entry. You just take a band of, multiple or varying thicknesses, wrap it up and over a pull-up bar, and you can get, in some combination of bands, you can get almost everyone in your gym to get their chin over a pull-up bar. So I think
Sure.
in terms of barrier to entry of like making that happen, it provides the lowest barrier to entry. And that's not to argue efficacy or is it the right option, but I think that's why it's become so popular. It's just the ease of assigning it.
Well, so I guess, hey, diagrams.
I'm sure you're doing a great job.
So I guess my issue with that is like, what the fuck is the goal? Like, is the goal just to get them to get their chin over the bar? Because I want, so like, we're gonna do Fran.
Sure.
I assign the workout Fran, or the workout Fran is assigned. We are gonna
Mhm.
do Fran, which means we're gonna do 45 pull-ups. And I don't care about your actual development. I just want you to get your chin over the bar so you feel like you feel good about yourself. Like,
Ooh, so I have some like different, when you bring into like a Metcon type thing. So I think like a
sure,
banded pull up for a strict pull up makes more sense to me. And bear
sure.
in mind, I'm not as gymnastically profound and whatever as Sam is. Don't
I
have
call
nearly the
myself
same
profound,
things.
but yeah.
Don't wrap your thumb. Um, had to work that in there. Um, if we have a workout that is kipping pull-ups,
Yep.
so last week on Friday, we had a workout here at CrossFit Tilt, 3
Uh-huh.
rounds,
Uh-huh.
400-meter run, and then the reps descended 30, 20, and 10
Yeah.
of dumbbell snatches and pull-ups. So it went 400-meter run, 30 dumbbell snatches, 30 pull-ups. 400 meter run 20-20, 400 meter run 10-10.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Cool.
During that workout, because the stimulus of that workout is definitely more
Aerobic.
metabolic,
Yep,
and
sure.
we're looking for speed of movement and speed of transition. I've told my people it's like during conditioning workouts, people are like, what about a banded pull-up? Not
No.
today. Is first and foremost, one, it's going to make the movement strict, which gives you a chance to recover your heart rate, which I don't want that for you today. I want you to die.
Right.
Secondly, just the process of, especially if you have a thicker band, like mucking on that thing, yanking that bitch down toward, like, putting your knee in your throat to try and get your foot hooked around that sucker, and then sitting there going, got that on there, step onto your box, hands on the pull-up bar. It's been 15 seconds and you haven't even hopped on the bar yet. So I tell people, like, the bands are just going to slow us down way too much today.
Sure.
So the options that I'll give them for that workout is, like, we can obviously adjust the volume. So if the volume of pull-ups is going to be, like, we have kipping pull-ups, but repeating the sets we want to do in the volume we want is going to be a bit much. Let's bump that down to something appropriate.
Sure.
If that's not the case, I love having people working on their kip swing, like having more of a skill.
I think it's a great idea
on the pull-up bar, and like you're trying to, as aggressively as you can, like press down with straight arms, right? And work your way through.
Sure.
And then from there, if that's not a thing, a jumping pull-up. We'll set up I call them launch pads, which people find hysterical, but like you get a box or a stool or some sort of elevated surface, a couple plates under a pull-up bar at the appropriate height. So like the jump can assist the pull.
Sure.
And if you've ever done jumping pull-ups, you've ever done filthy 50s.
Yeah.
So many people look at that 50 jumping pull-ups. So I just do normal pull-ups. Like I'm a savage. I'll just do normal pull-ups. I'm like,
Nope.
Do jumping pull-ups. And if you think you're that much of a big dick, do all 50 unbroken, and then try your best to like inchworm your way across the floor to whatever's next.
Amazing.
That and the knees to elbow. People are just like, oh, I'll do toes to bar. I'm like, no. Knees to elbow are harder. They're like, but it's less range of motion. I'm like,
no, it's not.
No, it's not.
Nope.
No, it's not. But then every time I teach that in class, I'm like, all right, I have to do an anatomy lesson. Like, this is your fucking elbow.
Not your tricep.
This is not your elbow.
Yeah.
This is not your elbow. Fucking elbow.
Yeah. We do that same bit in TGC. We talk about like how knee to elbow is a common scaling option for a toto bar, and it's harder.
People don't do them right because it's not. So it's not a scaling option. You're doing a knees to chest is what you're doing.
Yeah, and you're doing a higher hanging knee raise.
Right, which is appropriate scaling option for a toes to bar. It's less range of motion if I just kind of tuck my knees towards my chest. But an actual knees to elbow either requires a stupid amount of lat strength to press down so my knee can get to my elbow, or you're doing like half a strict pull up to get your knee to your elbow, in which case like that adds a whole extra element in there.
And then there's that whole thing. So I want to come back to that pulling thing, right? So do this. Hey, whiteboard. Oh,
whiteboard.
Let me zoom out. You do what I want.
Hey. One of your 7,000 buttons.
I get so many fucking buttons. I'm gonna do that.
If you press enough,
here we go.
There we go.
All right. So there's two humans, right? So this human's hanging from a pull-up bar. He's in a hollow body position. Great. He doesn't have to be in a hollow body position, right? So like he doesn't have to have his midline contract. He can just let his body dangle, but he's gonna move in this direction, right? As he pulls on the bar. If I get a person into a band, the band is going to shove them backwards, right? So it's going to change the angle at which they're pulling. It's going to change the muscles that are being activated. Not to mention the fact that it's literally going to be the easiest at the bottom rather than the top when we want them to get up to it, right? So it seems to me like we're ignoring like basic physics principles when we get on for something like that, where it's like, it's going to pull. I'm going to go up and back. What's up?
So I had a question because because in my mind, something didn't compute there, and it might just be because I'm drunk, but so
it's been a day.
Thursdays, man. Fuck. So if what you're saying is like the hardest part of a pull-up is like the last, like basically from here to here, the last
Sure.
few of the pull. And that's where
Sure.
the band is helping you the least.
Absolutely.
It helps you the most in the bottom where you don't need it.
Right.
And it helps you the least in the position that you're weakest.
Yes.
If it helps you the least in the position that you're weakest,
Uh-huh.
would that not then garner more strength adaptation because you're having to do more of the pulling during the hardest part?
That presumes that you can do the pull-up anyway.
Okay, I'm just trying to listen. I'm playing devil's. I'm trying to challenge
Absolutely.
your whole thing here.
Absolutely. So if I have an athlete for
Yes.
whom they can do strict pull-ups, right?
Sure.
So like their max set is 1, right? Then I don't want them to do, let's say it's 5x5 weighted pull-ups, right? So there's
Yes.
going to be an athlete in that class for whom their max set is 1, right? Well, I want them to do 5 reps. If I have them do a band, right, it would be like if we're doing 5x5 back squat and after every set, at like you put your 1 rep max weight on the bar, and after every set, I have you like people help you squat it on the way down, and at the bottom they let go. And then like if you can get out of the bottom, they'll like pick it back up, but like it's hardest at the hardest part, right? So instead, if I was the coach in that class, if it's 5x5 back squat or 5x5 strict pull up, the band is not going to help you through the full range of motion, right? We want to not violate that full range of motion rule. Instead, I would have that athlete do 5-second eccentric negatives. An athlete is the strongest in an eccentric motion, right? And if you really want to challenge him, like 1 or 2 second ISO at the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way down, full range of motion. So you're loading that muscle group through the entire range of motion. And it's not in a way that is like they are going to be able to do multiple sets of that, where normally they might only be able to do 1 for a strict pull-up, right? So that's how I would approach that. And then for the jumping pull-up thing, I love jumping pull-ups. I think there's good ways and bad ways to apply them, and like specifically how the actual movement is done. I also love the beat swing. If I have an athlete who, like, we're going to do Fran. Here's a great example. I have an athlete who can't do kipping pull-ups. Of course, it's Fran. I don't want them to do,
don't make it strict.
Pull. No. And don't do ring rows, which is the same thing, right?
It's just a strict pull.
Exactly. So one of my favorite variations is like 5-5-5. So it's jump up, 5-second ISO at the top, 5-second eccentric, and then get to the bottom, 5 beat swings. And so they get a strength component, right? So there's ISO at the top, eccentric, right? Yeah. They get to work the skill, which is the beat swing, without having to beat, pull.
Worry about trying to, you're right.
Exactly. And the person who does beat swings is going to get much more of an aerobic feeling than the person who does ring rows.
1,000%.
And if you don't believe me, go do Fran and don't do any pull-ups and just do 21 unbroken beat swings.
Listen, like there's a reason why, like, during the warm-ups, like, all right, guys, we're gonna like hop on the bar for some beat swings.
Yep.
And we're gonna go 10 reps, and everyone does 6.
Yes.
Because they're like, I'm done with it. I've had enough of it. Fuck this noise. No more.
Yeah, exactly. So also do more beat swings. And if you're listening to this and you're like, what is a beat swing? We're talking about a kip swing, right?
What CrossFit calls a kip swing. I had to catch myself. I want to like continue that. I was going to say kip swing.
That's okay. I have a contention with them using the term kip, because kip means something very specific from a gymnastics standpoint.
Right. It's not gymnastically accurate.
Right. Well, and not to mention, actually, in the level, and this is my own opinion, but the terminology they use in a level 1 is very confusing.
It's confusing. You have a kip swing and then a kip.
Yeah.
Neither of which are what is gymnastically defined as a kip.
Exactly. But 2 kip swings and a kip.
I think it's like...
Fucking drives me nuts.
Also, if you want to fuck your people up, take them through the level 1 pull-up progression. If you have some athletes that are like, I'm a baller at pull-ups, it's like, that's cool. Like, do again, like using the terminology from level 1, do 2 kip swings,
Yeah.
1 pull up, 2 kip swings,
Yeah.
and like see if they can control their movement. I guarantee you most of them can't.
Well, they haven't been taught how to beat swing correctly.
Well, that too, but well, what I'm getting at is there's reasons for that.
For
But
sure. Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. So like here's and when we were kind of chatting about this like beforehand, but like, what the fuck are you doing? CrossFit? Like, and like and this is not my way of being like non-inclusive. I am genuinely confused a lot of the times. And I don't know if they have a plan for like the unified message that they want to present to people. Like, are you so like do you show this and most of the time it's gymnastics because it's this like I can teach you how to do a snatch with a PVC pipe and you can like self-modulate the load.
you say it's way harder to teach gymnastics, way harder to understand it because it's just way more complex.
Right.
Like we've talked about this on other previous episodes. Like with weightlifting, you learn the movement
Yeah.
and then you increase the challenge by just adding load.
Right.
In gymnastics, it's like you learned one movement, great. To increase complexity, you learn something infinitely fucking harder.
Well, the way it's taught is yes, they're all separate skills.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be taught like that, but that's neither here nor there. And so like obviously like because of that, we're talking primarily about gymnastics movements, but like is the goal when like if someone presents to me it's like I have an athlete who wants to learn how to run faster and instead of teaching how to run faster they say hop on a bike instead.
That's
Like
exactly where my head went for that analogy when you were like, if I want someone to run faster, I'm like, and someone goes, hop on a bike and go fast. Like
right.
that's just where my head went.
And
Oh,
like yeah,
tell me
they'll
you
go
spend too much time
faster.
talking to each other without telling me you spend too much time talking to each other.
Oh, for real. And so like yeah, they'll go faster, but
Yeah.
at what cost? And so the like the
And
long
not
term
that
question. Go
and
ahead.
not that going fast on a bike won't garner some sort of adaptation.
Absolutely.
If you hop on an assault bike and go full Tim Paulsend on that bitch, like
Paul
you're
send.
gonna yes, exactly. I'm pretty sure you made a T-shirt that said that.
Good
And
man.
I want one. But
Yes.
um, Tim Paulson, if you're listening,
Yes.
Talking Average Fitness, let's
Send
go.
it over.
um, but it's like if you go super hard on a bike, regardless of which bike, it could be Echo bike, assault bike, Concept 2 bike, whatever. If you're like going hard on that sucker, you're gonna garner an adaptation. However,
Yeah.
you'd have to be some type of idiot, and I'll go out and say that as harshly as like, please take offense to it. That's what it's
Yeah.
meant for.
Sure.
You have to be some type of idiot to be like going fast on a bike is a substitute for running or is like a similar stimulus to running. It's not. It's not even close. And I
No.
understand because we have some people here at the gym that, if they have an injury that pops up where it's like, hey, like I can't be load bearing
Sure.
on this joint at the moment, or like this is banged up. You substituting a Concept 2 bike in place of a run. At least I guess it's getting like the cyclical motion of like you moving your legs.
Yeah.
But and like if you have an injury, fine.
Yes.
Like and go ahead and do that. But if someone's like, if you have 400-meter runs, I'll bring it back to that workout we had on Friday. I told people like your 400s are under 2 minutes each round. Like I want you, again, we talked about like, I want you to approach this workout with zero regard for your personal well-being.
Yes.
That's what we're going for.
Yes.
I want you to like be coming in from your first run and question every life choice you've made that has led you to this moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and so
Sucking air.
I want you going. And so 2 minutes or less for all 3 rounds. Not I PR'd my 400 and did 2 minutes on the first round. And then it was like 2:30 and 3 minutes for the rest. No, no,
Right.
no. So like I was like, I don't care if we have to run 100 meters to do
Right.
that. If 100 meters is going to be the challenge that gets you in that time frame and you're running, let's fucking do it.
Right.
I'm all for it. even if it's like a little bit different, like, hey, 100 meters is what I can manage.
Right.
It's maybe a little bit less time instead of like, taking in like, the minute 45 range. It's more in
Right.
like the minute 20 range for that person or a minute, but
Yep.
that's a distance they can run and they can like get the right stimulus for it. Sick.
Yep.
Because the stimulus, if I'm like shooting for that workout to take like 8 to 12 minutes and they finish in 7, did they miss the point? Absolutely the fuck not.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're going to be rolling around on the floor for the next 9 minutes.
Right.
Which is what we're going for.
Which is what we're going for.
So it's like, instead of just being like, well, I can't run 400 meters in 2 minutes, I'll just do 800 meters on Concept 2 bike. No.
So, okay. So I buy that, right?
We whatever from pull-ups to biking, but
well, no. Listen, I mean, we're gonna come back to it. But like, and so like coaches, like, if you're a coach and you're listening to this, and I went on a rant recently.
Yeah, I was went on a rant.
Just one. Like, I went on a rant. I'm doing this video series for the level 4, and like, I went on a rant talking about like you don't get to not do certain things, right? And so like there's a division, of course, between exercise instruction and training and coaching. And
yes.
and I had this discussion with a coach who I was talking to this morning. We were doing some feedback sessions, and this person, I said flat out to this person, I said, you are capable of coaching. Most of the time you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking specifically about the provision of individual cues and corrections for a person for the intent of helping them reach an intended stimulus or, correct application of threshold training.
Right.
And to me, this all comes back to professional responsibility. Like, it is your job to figure that shit out so that you can be the best version of what you want to do. And when it comes to this kind of stuff, like, no one would sit there and be like, yeah, it's a 1-to-1 running and biking. Some people decide that they don't care.
Right.
And they're like, I don't care enough about what is going on for that to be a consideration of mine. And I'm like, okay, like the affiliate model allows you to do that. You're the head coach, or you're the coach, and maybe your head coach doesn't give a shit how you run your classes. Like, that's how you want to run that. That's fine. But it's another thing entirely for me when CrossFit headquarters, big umbrella mothership CrossFit,
yes,
puts out content that is like, this is how we do stuff. And I'm like, part of me gets pissed off because it's like, that's not how we do stuff. That's how that person in that video does stuff, right? But by highlighting it, you put a spotlight on it, and you, whether implicitly or explicitly, like, you bless it and you ordain it, and you're like, okay, that's okay.
Yeah.
And I don't know, for me, where I draw the line. Like, I know for myself personally, like, I have a standard for how I do things, and like a lot of that is rooted in my experience as an educator on TGC staff, and the why behind my doing things a certain way comes from a lot of that. But I don't understand the why when they do shit like that. And I'm, maybe is it simply to just provide a path for people to get their fucking chin over the bar?
And maybe that's just as simple as what it is. It's like, hey, this is just a way that trainers can use to, regardless of, and I'll throw this one out there because it might change the equation, it might not, regardless of the level of trainer, to be able to get someone's chin above the bar. Because you know that if Sam, and I'll phrase it this way, if Sam Burns, fresh off his level 1,
Sure,
got his level 1 on Sunday, it's now Monday morning. I'm ready to rock and roll and coach my first class. Let's get some.
God help Sam Burns.
God help everybody in that room. But
real.
But if that version of Sam is dealt a pull-up workout, like you don't have the knowledge you currently have. You're not on
Oh,
CrossFit Gymnastics seminar staff. You haven't gone through all the development to learn all the shit. And I know
yeah,
that you and I were in a unique scenario where we were
yeah,
at gyms that did the thing right and did it well. And we were very fortunate to have very high level people allow us to ride their coattails long enough to learn how to stand up.
yep.
But that version of Sam might not have had the capacity to actually coach in a way that would be
Oh, it didn't.
beneficial to pull up
Did
outside of.
not. Yeah.
Okay, I was trying to be nice, but
Let's call
um,
a spade a spade. Like
okay,
I didn't know from my ass
because
from a hole in the ground.
because I know for me, like pull up options and like pull up options where you either did kipping pull ups, you did banded pull ups, or you did a ring row. That was the holy trinity
Yeah.
of upper body pulling.
Yeah, that was it.
You're going to be your one,
Yeah.
and you know, man, it's you come a long way, but of course, like in at that point in my journey, my development, I didn't know any better. I didn't have anybody to show me any better. It was just like, this is what we do. And I was like, cool, rock on. This is what we do. Don't have a kipping pull up, hop into a band. Can't quite make that
Right.
one band, or you have to use 7 bands to make it happen. Let's maybe
Ring
go with the
rows.
ring. And that was the whole thing, the whole kit and caboodle. Um,
Right.
so, it's one of those things where maybe it's just an avenue that trainers can use or an option, regardless of the level of trainer, that would allow them to accomplish the goal of getting people's chin over the bar.
So then maybe would it be accurate then to say that these things are not scaling options for athletes, but they're scaling options for trainers?
Ooh, I don't think that's I don't think that's wrong, but I like don't 100% agree with it because it is still in theory like a scaling. I get what you're saying. Like it makes it way easier for the trainer than it does for the athlete. So
Well,
like
it's because it's not solving the athlete's problems,
right. And depending on the workout and the athlete, it's not necessarily assisting in getting the athlete to the desired stimulus.
right?
Right.
So then maybe that's why they highlight it, is because the problem we are solving for is for Greenhorn Sam.
Yeah.
And God help anybody who's in his class, you
Yeah.
know? And man,
God
I
bless.
think sometimes about the squirrely shit that I used to do. And like that's an amazing thing for you to say. And I'm so happy you said it because I forget that. I forget very often that like it's been 6 years of coaching continuously and just being at a high level. And when I say being at a high level, I mean trying to push myself, right? Trying to
Yeah.
not be complacent and like deliberately surrounding myself with people who would be like, the fuck did you do that for? Be better, you know?
Yeah.
And I forget that Sam existed.
Yeah. Well, because
Or
now
then,
you're in the position where you're the person going, why the fuck did you do that? Be better.
right.
But
And
and for the people that you work for, like,
yeah,
thank God they have you, because otherwise they would keep doing banded pull-ups and ring rows at
yeah,
forever and always, you
yeah.
know? Um, so
Well, it might be then that, this is like a nice little bow to put on it, at least for the 50th episode.
yeah,
We're almost a year deep,
almost a year deep.
almost a year deep. Um, I can, for my individual self, have my own standards. I can
Mm-hmm.
also remember that not everyone has had the luxury of the, for lack of a better term, upbringing that
Mm-hmm.
we might have.
Yep.
And that more importantly, like sometimes the problems we have to solve, rather, sometimes the content that is presented is not trying to solve a problem for the athlete,
Right.
you know? And
Mm-hmm.
we're scaling for the understanding of the trainer sometimes. Because for
Sometimes.
better or for worse, that person is still in front of a group of people. And they're
Yep.
still leading them through that workout. And it's not like the workout is what it is or is what we got, or the athlete is what it is. Sometimes the coach is what it is, and that's what we got.
Yep. Everyone had to start somewhere. I mean,
Amen.
if you had put me in front of that CrossFit Boston One Nation crew, like fresh off my level 1,
Woo.
I never would have gotten that internship. I'd have been like fired. They'd be like, you get as far away from here as humanly possible.
Bro.
So
We'll never forget Meg Burns and Sam Hornstein just tearing me apart.
yeah, I mean, it's old Greg.
Yep.
So
God, so great. All right. Well, I don't want to steal any more time. This is a nice little thing for me to be reminded about and for us to peel apart. And anyone who listened, like, sure, do jumping pull-ups and do bands, but also like don't, have different options. And hopefully your coach understands that. If they don't, tell them to call us.
we'll help
Happy
them
to
out.
talk about it. Final thoughts other than trying to convince people not to wrap their thumbs.
I'm glad you put that quantifier in there because I immediately was going to be like, don't wrap.
I know.
I don't know. I can always leave them with like a pike is not a hollow, which is in gymnastics sense. When it comes to serving your athletes, like the only limitation is like your creativity.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing is when it comes to scaling options for your athletes to get them the proper stimulus. First things first is like know and understand the stimulus that you're going for with that workout and with that training piece.
Yeah.
And then once you know the stimulus, this is going to be more of a metabolic workout. This can be more of like a muscle endurance workout. It's going to be more of just a strength workout, whatever it is. Once you know the stimulus, that can guide your scaling options.
Yeah.
And the sky's the limit. It's as creative and as invested as you want to be.
That's a great way to put it.
Like I said,
and to be clear, your clients need you to be invested. So be invested. Awesome. Kevin, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you, sir.
Well, thank you.
All right, everybody who's tuned in so far, we will see you next week. Stay out of trouble, try to be fit, and always wrap your thumbs. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. I did the wrong thing. I opted out of the studio instead of ending the recording.
Yeah, you left, and I was like, it's still going.
Hilarious.
Well, I didn't say anything. I was just like, if I wait long enough, maybe it'll fix itself.
No, here we